Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of African Techpreneur. This is episode 9. Can you believe it? Episode 9. So we've been at it for 9 weeks, and it's been exciting. You know, we've received some phenomenal feedback. This morning, I got some feedback from Yes for Youth, and they are really happy with the feedback they're getting from youth. We also have a number of schools and NGOs that log in for the live stream every week, and they are really benefiting from that. In fact, this has spun out into an entrepreneurship workshop that we'll be doing with an NGO based in Durban, which is cool. But we're going to start off in Durban, but obviously it's going to spread to other places in the country. Today's episode is about personal branding. Now, what exactly is personal branding? So we're going to touch on that. We're going to touch on what is personal branding, why it's important, some of the most famous personal brands out there, and how to set up a personal brand. So what is a personal brand? A personal brand is, in a nutshell, it's how people see you. It's what opinion they have of you as a person. Now, I'll give you an example. Last year, I was relaxing at a coffee shop in Amslanga, and I saw two gentlemen crossing the road, and one of them I know for many years, and the other I don't know. So, we went and we met each other, handshakes, and the guy introduces me like this. The guy who knows me introduces me to his friend. He says, "This is Bilal Katrada, and he's an artificial intelligence expert." So that's the first thing that came to his mind. Truth be told, I'm not an artificial intelligence expert. I'm fascinated by the topic, but I know not a hell of a lot about it. I know a lot about it, but I'm not an expert in it. But that was the brand that I had created through my writings and through the videos that I was putting, because it was around that time that I put out a lot of articles about AI and its implications in our future. So that's where my specialty lies, in the implications, in the practical implications of AI in careers, business, and our personal lives, not so much in artificial intelligence itself. Then, so that shows you something. It tells you something about what messages you are putting out into the world. Sometimes you are deliberately putting out a message, and sometimes you are inadvertently putting out a message to the world. And that message is what's received by people, and what perception they draw up about you as a person. And that becomes, fortunately or unfortunately sometimes, your personal brand. Now, let me give you an example of a negative personal brand, right? You probably heard of scenarios where somebody's coming to visit, that one auntie is coming to visit, and all the kids are like, "Oh no, not her again. She's so boring. All she talks about is about getting married." So, that's the personal brand that auntie might have created, and the perception she created in people's minds. Now, in business, we are doing that all the time. One is our business brands, and the other is the personal brands that we create around ourselves. And that's very, very important. And that's what we want to discuss today, because we've got so many young people here at IT Varsity who are studying development. They're studying web design, app development, software development. They're getting the skills, but they want that stepping stone into a job. How do I get into a position at a company? How do I get noticed? Well, let me tell you this. Your CV means nothing. In today's times, a CV means absolutely nothing. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a CV. The CV comes after the fact, and I'll tell you what that means. the thing that people buy into is your personal brand. And these young people that are hoping to get jobs, what you need to do is to establish a personal brand that is aligned to what your objectives are and aligned to you as a person, right? So if your objective is to show the world that you're a really good web designer, then your personal brand needs to talk to that. And that's what will get the attention of your prospective employers. And once you got their attention, then you send your CV. That's where the CV comes in. The CV is not an attention grabber. The CV is, well, Zach, you got my attention now. Send me some information about yourself. And then I'll take a look at your CV. You emailed me your CV. Very good, good background. It confirms what you were saying. There are some references and you confirm what you're saying about your personal brand. So, and that's very important. A personal brand is a critical stepping stone into your career, into getting that dream job that you wanted. And I always use this as an example. You know, when I was in my final year of university, it was very difficult, very difficult to get a job. In fact, it was almost impossible to get a job. It's, you know, I was caught up in that job experience vicious cycle, right? I couldn't get a job because I didn't have experience, and I couldn't get experience because where do you normally get experience? You get experience on the job. And I was caught up in the cycle. So I asked a software developer, a very experienced software developer, for some advice. He says, well, you need to build yourself up. You need to learn the skills and you need to put out. And that's where I started. I approached an NGO and I offered to build their website, and I started building that website. But as I was building that website and learning the new skills, I was keeping the software development companies that I was aiming to work for up to date. I was giving them information about what I'm doing. I'm starting now. And I started with almost no knowledge, right? And I built up over time. And then, you know, I kept them in the loop. Eventually, after I think a year and a half, when they saw that my skills went from zero to really good. I mean, I developed, this was pre-WordPress days. I had developed a site for them that is very similar to what you can do with WordPress. For those IT Varsity students who are in Module 7, you'll know WordPress. You just set up WordPress by uploading your files via FTP to the server. But in those days, it was just before WordPress became really famous. And I built a content management system with PHP, geeking out a bit here. For those that are not techie, just think of a very complex dynamic website. So I did this, and finally I got that interview. It just got me in the doors. It just got me that interview, and because they saw what I'm capable of, and you know, I went through that interview and I ultimately got the job. So for job seekers, you need to put yourself out into the world. And this is something we keep emphasizing at IT Varsity, right? At the end of every module, we have a reminder that you learn something new, tell the world about it, share this on social media, share this on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, especially LinkedIn. We're always emphasizing to our students, set up your LinkedIn account. Support team is always chasing up. Is your LinkedIn account up to date? Is your photo a professional one? Is the story you're telling about yourself good? Is it accurate? Is it free of spelling and typographical errors? Why are we doing this? Why do you think we are doing this? Why do you think we are putting so much emphasis on this when no other institute in the world puts that kind of emphasis? The answer is simple. We are helping our students to set up their personal brands, to establish their personal brands on social media. That's the best place to establish a personal brand, right? Because the moment you put yourself out there on social media, there are literally billions of people on social media. There is not the slightest chance in the world that in the real world, you'll have exposure to almost or more than 1 billion people. But on social media, you do have that potential exposure. So that's why we keep emphasizing with our students, become personal branding experts. While you are working with us during this 1 year at IT Varsity, learn as much as you can about LinkedIn, learn about Twitter. Even if TikTok works for you, go for it. Put your personal brand out there because people are watching. Companies are looking for people like you. They're looking for dynamic young developers with the skills to develop websites and apps. But until you don't put yourself out, nobody's going to find you. They're not going to find you. People are not going to come to your home and look for you. They're not gonna, go through thousands of CVs just to find you. You have to stand out. It's like, in a crowd of people, if I'm standing and I'm looking at a crowd of people, you got this one person that's jumping and putting their hands up, me. You're getting people's attention. So that's what a personal brand is about. It's about creating a positive image of you as an expert in your field in the eyes of the community. It's as simple as that. And, that's so much for emerging professionals. But a personal brand is also very important in the entrepreneurship field. Now, lots of entrepreneurs think that, the company brand is the only thing that matters. But that's not true. It's not just the company brand. It's the company brand and the personal brand that in combination work much better. Because listen, here's a very important a bit of business advice. People don't buy your product. People buy you. Listen to that. People don't buy your product. They buy you. In other words, they don't buy a product because they think it's good. They'll buy a product because they trust the person who is selling that product. So you need to build up trust. And the best way to build up trust is to build a personal brand. A personal brand, and not a fake personal brand. Please don't get me wrong here. Don't try to portray yourself as something you're not. Like a used car salesman kind of tactic. Hey, you can trust me. You can trust me. That kind of thing. Sorry, that was a bit weird. So what I'm trying to say is you need to be authentic. You need to be sincere in your personal branding, and people will trust you. And out of that trust, they will buy from you. That is one of the most important lessons that I personally learned in business. And, I learned from so many other business people and professionals like Steve Jobs.
Yeah, there's a reason Apple is the first $1 trillion, company. It's got to do with the fact that it started off with Steve Jobs was a really powerful personal brand that had a chain reaction to the company that still, lasts to this day.
Yeah, and he became something of a legend in his own time, and people loved him and admired him as a person. 2 movies were made out of his biography. For heaven's sake, that says something. You raised an important point earlier. Who is the CEO of Samsung? Nobody. I don't know who's the CEO.
Like a handful of people will know, but everybody knows who Steve Jobs is.
Yeah, and there's lots of other examples like that, right? Tesla.
Elon Musk.
Right.
Toyota.
Toyota, I don't know.
Toyota, I think, obviously sells more than Tesla. It's much more available. It's a much more popular company. So
it's huge. It's much bigger than Tesla.
Yeah.
But there's no personality. There's this big blue corporate that's behind the scenes, that's running the show. But having a person as the ambassador to a brand, it makes all the difference. It makes such a big difference because it's what brings the human side to an otherwise lifeless brand. And people are not interested in corporate brands.
Yeah. And when people hire like actors to be the spokesperson or face of their company, for so many millions of dollars, when they can just do it themselves and it'll come out as more authentic anyways.
Yeah, I think that can it's not being authentic, but it can also backfire in a very big way. It can backfire because recently, I don't know if you remember Justin Long, the actor who was the brand of Apple back in the days. Mm-hmm. So Justin Long is an actor, and he used to act in Apple adverts, right? And he used to be the cool, hip Mac guy. And then there was a Windows guy who was a big, overweight, bumbling nerd kind of guy. Mm. And they used to do these comparative adverts. Now, these are very successful adverts. But what happened recently in the past couple of months is that Intel hired Justin Long to make their adverts that bash Apple now. So, I mean, he's an actor, right? Yeah. He's there for hire. But nobody could have hired Steve Jobs to act on behalf of their company. Mm. Steve Jobs is Apple, and Apple is Steve Jobs. That's what people know. Elon Musk is Tesla, and Tesla is Elon Musk. But, it's interesting you mentioned actors, because without us realizing, many public figures and actors also establish very powerful personal brands, right? Give us some examples, since you are.
Okay, so an actor, right? When you think of the term bodybuilding, who comes to mind?
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Right, and yet I think it is 3 decades since he has participated in any bodybuilding event.
Yeah, yeah.
I think there's one line that made him really famous.
Who doesn't know that line, right? I'll be back.
Yeah.
Or if you think about "Hasta la vista, baby," those are his famous lines. And I think of all the actors that I know, he was the best at personal branding, because I can't think of another actor that actually.
Okay, I think one that really takes a lot of pride in their personal brand these days is Dwayne Johnson.
All right.
Who built his brand not just around his acting, but around his bodybuilding, his clothes lines, his tequila.
Yeah, yeah.
And he used his social media following, which is huge, to sell everything and become really billionaire.
But he doesn't have that one line or that catchphrase, or maybe with him it's that glare, that Dwayne Johnson glare thing. Yeah, maybe that's his thing. But what we are seeing here is that personal brands are not just effective in getting people's attention. It's something that keeps people's attention, right? Arnold Schwarzenegger went from bodybuilder to actor to governor, but we'll always remember him as either actor or bodybuilder, even decades after his.
And even though he's not even close to being a great actor by any means, he's still, paid top dollars to act.
Yeah.
That's because his personal brand, people want to see him.
Exactly. And I was reading somewhere recently that the reason that all Terminator movies after Terminator 2 failed was because of Arnold's personal brand. You couldn't have a Terminator movie without him in the lead.
Yeah.
It was just like that. It's a similar thing with Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean. You can't imagine it. And they're going to try. I know they're going to try. But we know what's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? The world knows what's going to happen. It's because these actors have established personal brands. And then these entrepreneurs that establish personal brands, artists, if I say, here's a painting that I painted, it took me 5 years. It's a work of art. And here's a scribble that was done by Picasso. Now, I'm not gonna, my work of art, that masterpiece that I worked on for 5 years, will not fetch anything close to the scribble that Picasso did on a Soviet tissue.
Yeah,
right?
Because ultimately, who are you in the art community,
He's got the branding behind him. So guys, remember this is very very important. The personal branding is extremely important. I hope we manage to give you some kind of inspiration to go out and create your personal brand. I mean, another example is coming to mind, which is Colonel Sanders, right? When you think of Colonel Sanders, white guy with the white fluffy hair and that little bow tie, what are you thinking of? You're thinking of KFC.
Yeah.
Now, why is KFC still clinging onto that Colonel Sanders?
Why is a company that sells fried chicken, why is an old man the logo? And why doesn't anybody question that?
Because that's the way it always has been, the Colonel's original recipe. In fact, I was at a mall food court this past weekend, and I saw, in front of the KFC, we were sitting at a table having coffee, and on the table, they had a graffiti scratched out. And at first glance, you'd think that somebody did that. They carved it out with a knife. Some vandal came and did that. But when you look closely, it says Colonel Sanders, because it was right in front of KFC. So they're sticking to that person, that personality, because they base their foundation on that brand, on his brand, because they know, their marketing department knows that the strongest brands are the ones that are backed by people.
I like the idea of like the food industry and how that works, because I mean, look at Jamie Oliver for an example, right? He's not the greatest chef in the world. I imagine the greatest chef in the world is probably stuck in some kitchen in Italy,
Yeah.
But he will be paid more because he built such a vast personal brand on his books, his videos, and he doesn't even need to own restaurants, but he does, because I guess he kind of has to, because he's a chef.
Yeah, he's probably not even in the top 100 best chefs in the world. Him, Gordon Ramsay also, but they have the personality and they've established a personal brand. I was actually listening to a podcast this morning about Rick Steves. Now, Rick Steves, for those that like watching travel videos on YouTube, check out Rick Steves Europe. This guy is this ancient guy who from the 1970s started traveling to Europe and teaching people about how to go and travel Europe very cheaply. And he started doing some classes and he wrote some very basic books. He has built up $100 million business just on his personal brand, just on that alone. In fact, in the podcast, you were saying that even though they had the opportunity to go public with their company, they had the opportunity to get investors and to grow very big, very fast. They resisted all that. They rejected it because, in his own words, we didn't want to lose our soul. In other words, for him, that brand that he built up, that trust that he built up, was more important than any money that outside investment could have brought. And that's a really good example for me because, IT Varsity, we are always resisting getting outside funding. The one time we got outside funding, it was an absolute disaster because we almost lost our soul there. And there was a tremendous amount of pressure on us to give up everything we believe in, quality and service, and go for money. But that's the way it is with investors. Okay, so we understand, the importance of a personal brand, and we've put forward so many different examples. And as you go into the corporate world, as you go into the professional world, you'll find that people have just, they've just done phenomenally well with their personal brands. They get the business, they get the speaking engagements, they get the jobs and they demand the prices because they have the personal brands behind them. So the next question is, how does a person, okay, let's take a persona, a student, 20, 21 years old, studying entrepreneur course at IT Varsity. How does she create a personal brand? She has no expertise. right? Where does she start?
I think the first, like the most important piece of baseline like advice I can give is that be authentic, be yourself. Because if you try to put on a persona, you end up looking like every used car salesman or Instagram beauty guru or something, where it's just everybody is the same. There's nothing that makes them unique or separates them. So if you are inexperienced, embrace that, ask questions about that, form your content around you learning with your audience.
That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. And it's something I keep telling our students, right? Don't worry about the fact that you have no skills. What people want to see is they want to see the progress from zero to finished product. Here's an example. You mentioned Jamie Oliver earlier, right? Why do people like watching cookery shows? Why don't they just go and look at videos or photos of the end product, right? Here's Jamie Oliver's Moroccan lamb tagine, perfectly cooked by Jamie Oliver. Taste it. That's delicious.
I would say at least like 1% of people who watch the videos actually do the recipes.
Yeah. But people want to see the story behind the story.
Yeah.
That's why movies, the behind the scenes videos are so immensely popular.
Yeah, it's
right.
It's an insight into what happens behind the authenticity of the movie. The fact that it's actual people, not characters.
100%. That kind of makes it, even though you see the behind the scenes, you see the actors wearing these weird motion capture clothes with all the dots on their faces and the cameras in front of them, it kind of makes it more real.
Yeah, it makes you appreciate the end product more. So like same way your audience will appreciate, or whoever, if you're an entrepreneur, they'll make you appreciate, they'll appreciate your business more. Or if you want to get hired, they'll appreciate the journey you've taken to be where you are. Everybody has struggles that they go through, getting a career. But if you document that, you become.
One person told me a couple of years ago, he says, Bilal, you seem to, or the thing I admire about you is you seem to have everything figured out. And in my mind, boy, oh boy, if you only knew, if you only knew how chaotic things are. But that's what entrepreneurs do, right? They bring order to chaos. So that's the first tip. Be authentic, no matter what you do. And being authentic is not only about not trying to act like someone else. It's also about putting out who you really are as a person. And people like that, right? Number one, you're an amateur. Fine. Don't pretend to be anything more than an amateur. Number two, you are a multifaceted person. You're not just a software developer. You might have other likes. Maybe you like animals. Maybe you like art. Maybe you like taking walks in nature. Those, or maybe you like doing Legos. The other day I was seeing a documentary about guys in Korea who spend millions of dollars on Legos, and they've got these halls filled with Lego blocks and Lego constructions of theirs. But they're not professional Lego people. They are professionals in their own world, maybe business people, IT professionals, but they combine that. So people want to know the unique mix of different interests and different backgrounds that make you as a person, not that polished version that some people put out on Instagram and on other social media like TikTok. They want to see who's the authentic person. And for me as an entrepreneur, when I'm interviewing someone, I'm interviewing, and I'm actually interviewing to find the personality, not the not the skills, but the personality. And I think your personal brand should speak to that personality of who you really are. So one is your expertise, fine, but with that expertise, who's the human being behind those expertise? I don't know you were the world's best .NET programmer. Okay, that you can easily prove. But are you the type of person who I can work with? Are you the type of person who it'll be a pleasure to work with rather than, somebody just all crabby all the time? So number one, be authentic. Number two, I'll go for this one, right? Number two, keep putting yourself out there. I know it's the hardest thing to do. I know we are afraid of putting ourselves out there, but this is something I keep saying to IT varsity students. Keep putting out on social media, because that's how you will get noticed. Don't just put your profile and keep it there. People are not going to find your profile. Become active. You've learned something, put it out there. You found something interesting, put it out there. You were going through social media, you found something interesting on someone else's timeline, share it or comment on it or like it. Be active. It's like, I read in so many different books. People have very short attention spans these days. They might see something about you now, and half an hour later, they forgot totally about you. But then later in the day, they see something else. They say, hey, this guy is Zax. He's putting out lots of interesting content about the movie industry. This guy must be some kind of fundi on movies and digital marketing or whatever.
And it has a reaction where if somebody asks that person, about the same topic, you'll come to mind first, and they'll refer them to you. Talk to this guy. He knows what he's talking about.
That's actually a very good point. You become the go-to guy.
Yeah, you become the, what they call it, the staple in your industry, the leader of your field.
The one everybody thinks of.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, that also happened to me this weekend. I'm not boasting here, guys. I'm just telling you some realities. I was at a wedding, and I met this guy, and he says, Bilal, we were just, your name came up in a meeting last week because we want to invite you over to our school to give us guidance on technology integration at our school. I was all right. See, when I'm not even present, people are talking about me, and this was out of town. This wasn't even in town. So when you keep putting out, people take notice. And then people start to respect your personality, as well as your professionalism, as well as your skill, and the combination of those three things becomes your personal brand. It becomes the person that you put out into the world. So whether we're out of time, but in a nutshell, whether you are looking to go and get a job as a professional, or whether you are starting a business, remember, your personal brand is the most important thing, right? And I'll conclude with one example. I mentioned this in the past, where I had a very enlightening chat with a young lady who does secondhand clothing. So she goes out to the streets where these ladies are selling secondhand clothes. She buys them out. She takes them home. She takes photos of them, puts it on Instagram, and she puts up her markup, and then she ships the clothes to the buyers. But there's one other thing she does that is so important. Listen to this. She will record herself in the evening before packing the goods, right? So she'll say, well, Zax, you just, this shirt was bought by Zax. She'll fold it, she'll put it in a box, and she'll package it. And in the video, she says, Zax, your shirt is packed. And then she'll film herself going to the post office and putting it, checking it in. Zax, posted. You'll be getting it in a couple of days. What? She's doing phenomenally well. She is a favorite. People love buying from her because she's so damn entertaining.
Yes. It's that simple, just a video of her, doing what you would have done anyways.
Yeah. It's really cool. And we are living in a time when it's never been easier. In the old days, if you wanted to put out a video, you needed a TV show or something. Mm-hmm. Today, you just use your phone and you put it out on social media and you're an instant celebrity. Awesome stuff. Akifa, we'll stop now and we'll check if there's any comments or questions from
Yeah. Hi, thank you so much for that. Yeah, Ridwan is actually asking a question. I think Ridwan is our popular questionnaire for the week. um, so he's asking, how do I separate my brands, from his sports MMA fighting brand to being a web developer or entrepreneur? How do you separate those brands, especially when you are presenting yourself to clients and they may know you for one thing and you're coming to them maybe for something else? So how do you separate brands?
I think a good example there is Elon Musk with Tesla and SpaceX. I think he just kind of does both. And I guess know where you are. Like, depends if you are approaching a client that needs you for your web development skills, then you have a bunch of content focused on web development, already. And you approach them with that as opposed to the MMA.
Yeah, I think there's that approach, but there's also another approach, right? The other approach is to not separate the two brands and to put yourself out there as a web designer and an MMA master. And so, look, there's three things here. In Ridwan's case, there's actually three things. One is the fact that he is a web designer, and the other is he's an MMA master. So in his professional brand, obviously there's a clear separation there, right? But in his personal capacity, how would people get to know him as a human being, right? So for him, the value is in the fact that he's a martial artist and he's a web designer.
Yeah.
And I think that's very powerful. I think Ridwan, you shouldn't be afraid to put yourself out there like that. So when you're posting on social media, you should make it known that you're passionate about MMA, but you're also a professional web developer. I think people like that sort of thing because there's a certain level of respect for martial artists, right? Because you have discipline. It says something about your level of discipline, etc. That's why on lots of LinkedIn profiles, you see the guy who's advertising the fact that he's 7 Dan black belt or something like that. So I think combine that. But it's like Zach says, when you are going out, putting out a proposal to clients, then it's a different story. You're focusing on your web design aspect. But your client obviously is going to look at your background and they're going to say, well, hey, this guy he's a web designer and he's also a martial artist. And it becomes, in my experience, it becomes a conversation point.
Yeah.
Right? So Ridwan will go to a client and he'll be sitting and the client will say, I see on your social media, you're a martial artist. My son was interested in martial arts. What advice have you got for me?
Yeah. Yeah, like Arnold Schwarzenegger also. I mean, he's a bodybuilder, an actor, a governor, and he's still, he's successful in all three. And he was successful in all three.
And he made a go of it. So he didn't.
That is sort of it added to his personal brand in a sense.
Exactly. So what he did was he combined everything that he stood for, and he became, that unique person. So Ridwan combined them. Next questions, comments.
Okay, from Lebohang. So Lebohang says, I always worry about skills that I can offer, but are not yet mastered. Can I or should I use those as part of my personal brand? So basically, he's asking his underdeveloped skills. It's skills, but he hasn't mastered yet. Can he use that, in his personal branding?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As long as you are passionate about those skills, tell people you are learning. And exactly what you just said now, be upfront with that. Say to the world, I just learned JavaScript. I know nothing about JavaScript. A week ago, I thought Java and JavaScript were the same thing, but now I'm learning, just taking my first steps, and document your progress. See, that's the most important thing. Document your progress. Make a documentary about yourself, right? why did I get into JavaScript? What made me think about, okay, I heard a talk about why JavaScript is the language of tomorrow, for example, and then that inspired me. And then I went, I did lesson 1 and lesson 2, etc. So that journey of yours, journey from zero to a master in what you do, that's what people are interested in. Nobody wants to know. I mean, it's good that if people know, all right, here's a martial arts expert. But why do you think memoirs and biographies are so popular in bookstores?
Yeah.
Why? It's because people want to know, how did you get from zero to where you are today?
People want to learn from your experiences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they'll get inspiration from you.
Okay, there's no questions from the audience, but I do have one question. And, also from personal experiences of rebranding, when you're moving completely away from one aspect to another, and maybe you were popularly known for something and maybe it had even a negative, negative feel to your previous brand, but you rebrand it. How do you go from that? How do you make that switch in a way that is effective for your new brand?
Yeah, look, it's not easy because you are going from zero. Well, if you have no brand, you're going from zero. But if there's some negativity associated with your brand, you're going from like almost negatives. But what I would advise anybody to do is embrace that previous negativity, acknowledge it, don't hide it. The more you try to hide it, the more it becomes a sore point for you. And I'll give you an example, right? When I was teaching, this was about 13 or 14 years ago, there was this youngster who joined our school, he joined my class, and he had some shady past. And the other students would needle him about that. This was a grade 8 class. Well, it wasn't the youngster that had a shady past. It was his family. They were like gangsters and things like that in his family, and there were some criminals, but he was a good kid. But the other kids would needle him about it constantly. And this guy would get all worked up, and he was like, I'll kill you, you watch. So and they would have a good laugh. So I called this youngster one day and I said to him, if you just acknowledge it and say, yeah, well, that's who I am, you'll kill that whole taunting and mockery right there. You'll kill it dead in its tracks. But this poor chap couldn't get it. He just couldn't get it. And he just continued, and they would play the fiddle and this guy would dance. It was like that. So what I would say, Akifai, is embrace the what happened in the past, acknowledge it, and build your brand on top of that. Because that, again, is also a unique part of who you are as a person. Lots of actors have done that, like Robert Downey Jr. He acknowledges his past life as a drug addict. He ended up in jail. He really, he hit rock bottom. And when he changed his life, he didn't try to cover that up.
And people respected him for it.
Yeah, people respect him even more for that.
Okay, thank you so much. That was quite informative. I have a question from Avani Rukan, which is asking, as an entrepreneur, what are your views on social media presence? Do you recommend a personal branding page combined with your business, etc., or have separate business and social pages?
Okay, there's no right or wrong answer here, right? It all depends on what you are trying to achieve as a person and what is the nature of your business. Now, let me give you my personal example. My personal example is that I'm the founder of IT Varsity, which is a strong brand in itself, which is a business. It's not a non-profit. And as much as we focus on quality and on service, I keep IT Varsity separate from my personal brand because there's a whole lot of work that I do that's not IT Varsity related, right? For example, as much as we mention IT Varsity in the African Techpreneur program, it's really not an IT Varsity initiative. This is my initiative. This is me. This is me doing something I'm passionate about, which is encouraging young people to get into entrepreneurship. I speak at companies, I speak at NGOs for free, I speak at schools for free. They just cover my travel expenses. Again, it's not an IT varsity thing. It's a me thing. It's something that I am personally passionate about. But the thing is, it's inevitable. It's inevitable that I get linked back into IT varsity, but I don't do it for that reason. I don't want to come across as being salesy, that I'm selling IT varsity courses by doing all this. And for that reason, I don't, overtly discuss our courses or anything we're selling. I keep that completely separate. But there's nothing wrong with using your personal brand to promote your business. And I'll give you an example, right? Let's say a lady is selling Tupperwares, for example, and she makes regular videos about the latest products from Tupperwares. Hey, look at this new container, open it up, show people what's inside, what's the capacity, and say, I use this to store my cereals, or I don't know, whatever. That's now her developing a personal brand, but marrying it into her company brand and rolling with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that.
I think if I may, for a personal brand and a business brand, it works well that the business brand, this will sound weird, the business brand advertises or markets the personal brand. It creates the association that way as opposed to the other way, because people buy from who they trust.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're on your personal brand, every post trying to sell them something, you sound like a business yourself. You're not a person. You just market into them.
Yeah.
So if your business markets you, if you post about yourself on your business page, saying, "Go check this out that I'm doing here," you create that familiarity that people know, that association. People know it's in a healthy,
fantastic
way.
Fantastic. And the direct opposite to that, interestingly enough, in that podcast I was listening to this morning about Rick Steves, he said something very interesting. He said, the only problem that I have in my business is that it's my business is my personal brand. That $100 million business that he built is called Rick Steves Europe. And no one else knows anything besides Rick Steves Europe. But he said, but I have 100 people working for me. And it's unfair that they don't get mentioned as part of this brand here, because they are doing all the work now. And I acknowledge that they're doing all this work, but it's still Rick Steves. And he says the day when I'm not in the picture and the next person, the next successor comes and takes over, you know what he's going to be known as? Not Rick Steves. No matter whatever his name is, no matter what he does, he will be not Rick Steves. So I think going too much personal brand is not good. But at the same time, I mean, that almost happened with Apple. It almost happened with Apple. There was a lot of naysaying about Apple when Steve Jobs died, that no one will be able to run this company. But they recovered very well. But he had succession planning in place, right, with his people.
I think that's why you should separate your personal and business brand. Have that separation, so that people know it's two distinct. It makes it easier for, I guess, the future.
Yeah. So I hope we answered that question. We've run out of time. In fact, we've gone 3 minutes over time. I think we're going to call it quits here at this stage. Once again, to all those people that attended, thank you so much for taking out the time. And please share the video with your friends. It's going to be on Facebook right away, and it will be on YouTube later today. Please share the video, and we hope to see you next week. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.